Shabbat Shalom, everybody. We're so glad that you're all here. Many thanks to Lynn Pavilon for those beautiful pictures. This has been a week of great hope and great uplift for me, and I imagine for many of you. And Sarit, if you would turn on your camera, you are part of that hope and uplift. Because when we see a young person getting ready to take their place among other Jewish adults and step up and say, Hineni, here I am, well, it feels as though our story will go on, which is something I think we all hope for. It's part of our collective hope and dream. And so, Shabbat Shalom to the Jones family. Sarit, we're lucky enough to have 2 aunts, an uncle, and several cousins on with us. And we're so grateful for their participation today. We're going to start with a song without words. Hey, oh, oh, hey, hey, oh, oh, hey. La 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 Sarit and Bob and Rachel, we're going to ask Aunt Erica to read something in English that we might begin our service with a candle lighting. Aunt Erica.
As these Shabbat candles give light to all who behold them, so may we, by our lives, give light to all who behold us. As their brightness reminds us of the generations of Israel who have kindled light, so may we in our own day be among those who kindle light.
And we're going to ask Uncle Jason to please light those candles, and then Aunt Jill will say the blessing, and maybe even your cousins will help out.
Okay.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kashinu b'mitzvah atah Adonai shel Shabbat. Blessed are you, Adonai, our gods, serving of all, who hallows us with mitzvah, commanding us to kindle the light of Shabbat.
Beautiful. And Sarit, I'm going to invite you to rise and hold your glass of maybe juice, maybe wine, as I recite Kiddush, the sanctification for Shabbat. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu. V'shabbat kodsho be'ahava uvratzon chinchilanu, zikaron lema'aseh v'reishit, ki hu yom tehillah lemikra'ei kodesh, zecher letziat mitzrayim, ki banu v'harta ve'otanu kiddashta mikol ha'amim. V'shabbat kodshecha be'ahava ורצון הנחלתנו, ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת לחיים. All right, sweetheart, you may be seated. Leha leha dodi, lekrat kala, pane Shabbat mekave la la la. Leha dodi, lekrat kala, pane Shabbat mekave la la la. Leha dodi, lekrat kala, pane Shabbat mekave la la la. Leha dodi, lekrat kala, pane Shabbat mekave la. Shmor v'zachor b'dibur echad, hishmi'anu el ha'miuchad, Adonai echad u'shmo echad, l'shem u'tiferet v'hitila, lecha dodi, likrat kala, v'nei Shabbat negava la la la, lecha dodi, likrat kala, v'nei Shabbat negava la. So the Hatzik Kaddish, that which separates our beginning from our ability to come together as a community, even in times when we're not together, when we're spread out, when we see each other through camera, it allows us to know that even though we're far apart, we all sing together as one. Yitkadal ve'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, Be'alma divrach irutei v'yanlich malutei, B'chaychon uvyamachon uv'chayed b'chol beit Yisrael, Ba'agala uv'izman kariv v'imru Amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mevarach, Le'alam le'alam amaya yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yipa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yadar v'yadaleh v'yadalah shemei d'kodesha b'richu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata Tushbachata v'nechamata damiran be'alma v'imru Amen. I'll ask Sarit to rise, as well as her family, as she leads us in our call to worship the Baruch Hu.
You're leading us in it. Okay. Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamvarach.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed. All right, Sarit, if you would please, the Shema.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad.
Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto le'olam va'ed. You may be seated. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך ושננתם לבניך ודיברת בעם בשבתך ובביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי Vitem kedoshim leElohem. Ani Adonai Elohechem, asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz mitzrayim, lehiot lachem leElohim. Ani Adonai Elohechem. This prayer is the prayer of people's worries. It's a prayer said before lying down to go to sleep, when our ancestors believed our souls were taken from us, and then in morning were breathed back into us. Things look tricky in the dark, and whether it's a figurative darkness or a literal darkness, there is always light on the horizon. We just don't always see it. And so in singing this song, the belief that we will make it through, that we are strong and powerful in and of ourselves, and even more so when we're strengthened by community. Hashkivenu, Hashkivenu, Adonai Eloheinu leshalom, leshalom. Hashkivenu, Hashkivenu, Adonai Eloheinu leshalom, Adonai Eloheinu leshalom. We rise in body or spirit for our Amidah as our bat mitzvah and her family rise, and she leads us in prayer.
Adonai sefatai tiftach uvi agit hilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei Avotenu ve'Imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Leah, ve'Elohei Rachel. Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, ve'Konei HaKol, ve'Zocher Chasdei Avot ve'Imahot, Umevi Geula Livnei V'Nehem, Laman Shemo V'Ahava, Melech Azir U'Mashiach U'Magen, Baruch atah Adonai Magen Avraham ve'Ezrat Sarah. Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai, Mechaye HaKol atah Rav Lehoshia, Mashiv Hararach U'Morid Hagashem. Mechalkel Chaim B'Chesed, Mechaye HaKol Barachamim Rabim, Somech Noflim Berofei Cholim, Umatir Asurim, Kayem Eminato Lishanei Afar. Mi chamocha ba'al givrot, umi do melech, melech memit u'mechaye, u'matzmiach Yeshua. B'nei aman atah l'hachayot ha'kol, Baruch atah Adonai mechaye ha'kol.
Atah kadosh, Shimcha kadosh, u'kadoshim b'chol yom yichalucha, Selah. Baruch atah Adonai, ha'el, ha'kadosh. You may be seated. It is the yard site of our beloved Rabbi Herman Shulman. Just a couple weeks ago, we celebrated the yard site of our beloved Lada, his wife, of well over 60 years. And This particular Ritzay was one of his favorites. And so, in his memory, I sing it tonight. Ritzay, Ritzay, Ritzay Adonai Eloheinu Be'amcha Yisrael U'tefilatam Atikabel Adonai Tikabel V'ratzon Utehi L'ratzon Tamid Havodat Yisrael Amecha Baruch Atah Adonai Sha'otecha levadecha b'yirah Sha'otecha levadecha b'yirah Sarit, Rabbi Shulman died at 101 years old, and he was a rabbi for 70-something years. And he worried that his prayers weren't worthy enough, that he didn't pray with enough sincerity, that his prayers weren't quite right. And that really comforts me. I don't know how that makes you feel, but I'll tell you something. I don't think there's much you could say to God that wouldn't be right. Anything that comes from your heart, anything that you are feeling, all is available to you when you communicate with God. And right now is part of our dialogue with God. We speak now, and when we listen to Torah, it's God's way of answering us back. It doesn't mean that we're going to get what we want. It just means that we get to say what we need. And that's got to be enough. So I invite you all to take a moment for your own personal reflections. Ratzon imrechi lebi levanecha Adonai tzuri Adonai tzuri Begali All right, Seder Kriyat HaTorah l'Shabbat. Tomorrow you're going to ably read Sarit, and I have the honor that one of my past students is going to read Torah, chant Torah tonight. I can't tell you what a thrill that is, although I'm hardly old enough to have a student as old as Rob. But when you start at birth, that's what happens. Anyway, our Torah service begins with a Shema. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo. And it's an honor to present one of our vice presidents of our board of trustees, who is honoring his beloved father, John Comp, with the Aliyah this evening, his memory.
Baruch hu et Adonai Hamvorach. Baruch Adonai Hamvorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'torah.
Amen.
Amen. Gam tzonchem, gam b'charchem kechu, ka'asher dibartem valechu, uveirachtem gam oti, vatechezak mitzrayim al ha'am, limaher lishalcham min haaretz, ki omru kulanu metim. Vayisa ha'am et bitzeko terem yechmatz misarotam srurot besimlotam al shichmam uvnei Yisrael asu kidvar Moshe vayishalu Mimitzrayim, klei chesef, uklei zahav, ushmalot. Vadonai natan etchen ha'am, be'enei Mitzrayim, vayashilum, vaynatzlu et Mitzrayim.
Kol hakavod Rab. Wow.
And in English, take also your flocks and your herds, as you said, and be gone. This is Pharaoh speaking. And may you bring a blessing upon me also. The Egyptians urged the people on, impatient to have them leave the country, for they said, we shall all be dead. So the people took their dough before it was leavened, their kneading bowls wrapped in their cloaks upon their shoulders. The Israelites had done Moses' bidding and borrowed from the Egyptians objects of silver and gold and clothing. And the Lord had disposed the Egyptians favorably toward the people, and they let them have their request. Thus they stripped the Egyptians.
So amazing.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emet, v'chayei olam nata b'tuchenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'torah.
Amen. David, what a beautiful way to honor your dad. May his memory be a blessing.
Thank you. Shabbat shalom.
Hi, everyone. In reflecting on today's Torah reading, I went back to the summer to late May of 2020. I had just come home from my master's program, which was cut short. And at the time, I was finishing my sociology final online. And I looked out the window and to see what was apparently thousands of people marching for George Floyd at the corner of Halsted and Willow. And it struck me there was something very discordant between the insubstantiality of my putting electronic words to electronic paper, assessing blame for the great financial crisis, versus the physicality of putting feet to the pavement. Was it the model's fault? Greed, complexity, policy? These are cerebral questions. They live in the ether. George Floyd's breath and death were embodied in his neck. At the same time, I was reading a book called From Here to Equality, Reparations for Black Americans in the 21st Century. And those authors quote Frederick Douglass, whose words, really hit me. When the serfs of Russia were emancipated, they were given 3 acres of ground upon which they could live and make a living. But not so when our slaves were emancipated. They were sent away empty-handed, without money, without friends, and without a foot of land upon which to stand. That really made me reflect on our own people's emancipation from the narrow place, which we just read in Parshat Bo. As Douglas had previously commented on, the Jews were told to take spoil from the Egyptians in that story. Pharaoh tells the Jews to take their flocks and herds. They took Egyptians' silver, gold, and clothing. They stripped the Egyptians, not to mention the matzah, and of course, they left. They went to the promised land flowing with milk and honey. The story, as I had always conceptualized it, and as I've been teaching Emmanuel's first graders, is that the Jews could only take what they could carry with them. They didn't even have time for their bread to rise. But on the other hand, the Jews could not have even carried more with them. And the livestock walked on its own. And that really got me thinking about our Pesach rituals, and particularly about the very first line of Dayenu. Had the Lord brought us out of Egypt, it would have been enough. And we follow that with a litany of other blessings that we received along the way. But really, there's a step before the first line that would not have been enough. Had Adonai freed us from slavery with a mighty hand, but never stretched out his arm to part the sea, not enough. David would never write, "Let all that breathes praise God," but "I can't breathe," not enough. Solomon would never be king, but would lead a march on Cairo, not enough. Herzl would will it, but it would stay a dream, not enough. Today, estimates of the amount owed to Black Americans range from roughly $6 trillion to $100 trillion, depending on the estimation method, which could include cost of unpaid wages, reparations that have already been promised and were never delivered, or the damages from subsequent policies. The Black wealth gap currently stands at roughly $10 trillion. I'm not going to make any arguments in this forum about whether the United States can afford a $10 trillion payment or give a lecture on the macroeconomics of wealth transfer, because these arguments are moot. The Egyptians would not have said that they could afford to give up their slaves, nor their jewels, nor their firstborn children. And although the Egyptians were disposed favorably to the Jews and let them have their request, in our country, there will be a fierce opposition. But the debt remains unpaid and compounds by the minute. Amen.
Rob, I'm so grateful for your words today. And the beautiful way you chanted Torah. Anyone who heard Amanda Gorman's poem during the inauguration will recognize that there is so much work to do, so much work. And so just a small bit of her inauguration poem that it just, from the moment I heard it, I just couldn't get out of my head. So to let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left with, every breath from my bronze-pounded chest, we will raise the wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the golden-limbed hills of the West. We will rise from the wind-swept Northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked South. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover. And every known nook of our nation and every corner called our country, our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge, battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it, for there is always light. If only we're brave enough to see it. If only we're brave enough to be it. Our Misha Berach extends our wish to spread light over people who are hurting physically, mentally, spiritually, to let them know they're not alone, even though they may feel they are, and that we care. And so our congregation has been asked to think about Aviva Aliza, Laura Kina Aronson, Bethany Barrett, Barbara Berman, Harvey Bowler, Joan Bransfield, Fred Bueller, David Burchett, Fegas Sora Bachaya, Carol Cohen, Francine Fields, Debbie Frank, Eslyn Garb, Phyllis Goldblatt, Don Grandolfo, Mimi Harris, Toby Hartman, Ellen Hyman, Priscilla Hill, Harold Katz, Jeffrey Krause, Anne-Marie Kuleza, Robert Langfelder, Roy Lloyd, Miriam Lyon, Doug Marshall, Gerald Marks, Jimmy Miller, Nicole Moulton, Moshe Ben Chava Vanatan, Nicole Newcomb, Amber Noy, Don Olson, Mark Perlman, Gary Priest, Rodney Quayles, Shachar Bat Rachel, David Rosenthal, Arthur Rousseau, Alan Sager, Ruth Seidner, Sophia Seidner, Casey Siango, Kristen Rouse Skinner, Tali Stein, Michael Van Buren, Isabel Weiss, Virginia Wharton, Nachum Feivel, Ben Gedalia, Umasha. Rob, are there other names?
From the congregation as well. Bella Eisenstadt, Stacy Robinson, Mindy Jordan, Nicole Hazer, Bonnie Fields Libovich, Diane Jacoel, Allison Good, David Fleischman, Xander Schnitzer, Stuart and Terry Epstein, Gregory Sklavos, Lynn Mapes Riordan, Larry Pass, Phil Goldstucker, Kevin Hagan, Kay Arkin, Kate Brissett, Margaret Frost, and Becky Hanscom.
To all those who are hurting right now, we send you love and light.
May strength, who blessed the ones before us. Help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Mishe Berach Imotenu Mekor Havracha Le'avotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen.
We invite you to rise physically or spiritually as we continue with our Aleinu. Aleinu leshabeach l'adon hakol, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הרצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו כחמונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד. And so many things in our virtual village I want to tell you about. First of all, Saturday, June 23rd, live via Zoom, is our Tu B'Shvat Havdalah. So we're doing a little bit with the praying, a little bit with the singing, a little bit with the talk, actually a bit with the talking, but a chance for us to come together for Havdalah, and that we might celebrate one of our New Years, actually, the birthday of the trees. Tikkun Olam Book Club, Monday, the 25th, sign Shedding COVID-8. That's allegedly how many pounds, I wish it were calories, some of us have brought on and into ourselves during COVID. That's Thursday, the 28th, by Merle Shapira, and she is just phenomenal. And our Ishas, celebrating a trivia night, Saturday, January 30th. Living with your teenager, it's a thing. That's on February the 9th. And Together and Apart, the Shalom Hartman I Engage lecture series. You don't have to take my word for it. You could actually go onto our website, emmanuelkong.org, and look at our upcoming events. And there you would see a plethora of very fun things that you can do. I'm going to ask the Cook Jones family to be seated, to thank Sarit so much for leading us so beautifully, so ably, with such poise. It's not so easy learning in COVID land, and I'm so very proud of your efforts, Sarit. A poem for COVID. Or maybe not all of you did, but there was a lovely remembrance Tuesday night. A lovely remembrance of the over 400,000 souls that were lost to COVID-19. It has been a time of intense grief. Everybody knows somebody. And so a poem by Alden Salvi called One by One, a prayer as the COVID death toll mounts. God of consolation, surely you count in heaven just as we count on earth. In shock and in sorrow, the souls sent back to you, one by one, the dead from the COVID pandemic. As the ones become tens, the tens become hundreds, the hundreds become thousands, the thousands become 10,000s, and then 100,000s. Each soul, a heartbreak. Each soul, a life denied. God of wisdom, surely in the halls of divine justice, you are assembling the courts, calling witness to testify, to proclaim the compassion of some and the callousness of others. As we've struggled to cope, the souls taken too soon, whose funerals were lonely, who didn't need to die, who died alone, will tell their stories when you judge our triumphs and our failures in these hours of need. God of healing, put an end to this pandemic and all illness and disease. Bless those who stand in service to humanity. Bless those who grieve. Bless the dead, so that their souls are bound up in the bond of life eternal. And grant those still afflicted with disease or trauma completed and lasting healing, one by one, until suffering ceases and we can stop counting the dead in heaven and in earth. What is it we all can do? Well, we can all reach out to someone we know who is an essential worker and simply say thank you. They're putting their life on the line, whether they stand at a grocery store or they stand in an emergency room. And we have to say how grateful we are. And then reach out to one another. I know it's hard. I know talking on a computer and talking on the phone is simply not the same, but it will have to do until we can hug each other again. All those who have died of COVID and all those we miss because they are no longer by our side, they still live on in us as we carry them forward into the world, and we remember them with our Kaddish prayer. We remember in recent days Mickey Aherns, Kay Murray Hagan, Marty Lev, Steve Shore, Richard Weber, Francie Valinsky, Lana Davis Fields, and Jimmy Proctor. And Ruth Blankenstein, Daniel Cohen, John R. Comp, Morris Koenig, Myrtle Davis, Herbert Decker Sr., Camille Dodenval, George Dombeck, Zoe Ekaterina, Pamela Glazer Espana, Stuart Fiedler, Belle C. Fink, Leonard A. Frank, Philip Allen Glazer, David Goodman, Morris Goodman, Samuel Hyman, Heikel Katzen, Jacob Klein, Saul Levitt, Nancy Leibowitz, Larry Lipkin, Nathan Jack Miller, Isaac F. Morrison, Fanny Munzer, Harry Polsky, Jay Pritzker, Helen Sangerman, Rabbi Herman Schallman, Helen Schindler, Idell Singer, Ruth Slivka, Herman Stern, Hirsch Tazen, Diane Wales, Edna Weil, Ella E. Weil, Gertrude Stein Wertheimer, I beg your pardon, and Bernard Zion. Rob, are there other names?
From the congregation, Phil Necro in recent days, Kathy Bernhardt, Hammerin Hank Aaron, also in recent days, Chris Murphy, Neil Sheehan, Don Sutton, Randy Parton, and again Hank Aaron, and Adrian remembers her mother, Idell Singer.
memories, all of them, are with us as we join together in Kaddish Yatom. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, ba'alma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayachon u'v'yomachon u'v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, ba'agala u'v'zman kariv v'imru Amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mevorach le'olam u'almei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yithaleh v'yithalal shmei d'kudusha b'rihu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma v'imru Amen. Yehei shlam Rabbah min shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Oseh shalom b'mramav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. May the source of peace send peace to all of you who are bereaved among us. And may we all say, Amen. So, not only do I send my best, but I send the best from our beloved Rabbi Marantz. He's taking it easy this week, as he needs to. And although we miss him, we know he's there. Sarit, he joins me in congratulations. And I'd like to thank all of your family for participating, as well as David Rakowski and Rob Moss, who just, perfection. So grateful to all of you for being with us this Shabbat, for making my Shabbat special by you being here. Even though we might not see each other, I know you're out there. And it feels quite lovely. All right, I think we'll have to do this without the guitar, as my guitar seems to have a strap wrapped around it. We're going to just sing at Oseh Shalom together. Oseh Shalom b'mramav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu. Oseh Shalom b'mramav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu. Oseh Shalom b'mramav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. God, you're here even though we don't see you. And whether we believe or we don't believe, it's immaterial. One might believe or not. It makes them no less Jewish if they don't. You don't need us, but I think we need you. And as we wrestle with you, as our forefathers have wrestled with you, as our name suggests, Yisrael, one who struggles and strives with the divine, might we find a peace in that, in the struggle, in the not being sure. Know that that's okay. That we were touched with little less than divine, and that we can see and be the light if we just believe we can. I wish you a week of spreading your light. I wish you today a day of peace in the meantime. Shabbat Shalom.